Okay, everybody, welcome back, and let's get started. I had a little delayed response, a little delayed start, I should say, but I am now have all my equipment working, which is great. Because today I'm going to show you some networking features with Android, and I needed a network connection, and I didn't have one, so now I have one. If you have been paying attention to some of the new videos I've been putting out, I fixed the emulator problem. No longer will I ever suffer from a slow emulator. Have you guys watched that video yet? Oh, good. Very good. Yeah. Actually, it's running in VirtualBox, and let me just show you it real quick. We don't need that one either, or this one either. VirtualBox, I just loaded it up, and it took me about almost a half an hour to get it to work on this network, so I'm not going to take it down. I'm not going to risk it. But you install Oracle VM, and there's an entire video on how to do this. On the YouTube site, and I'll put the video, I think I may have even put it in the bhacker.com website as well. But long story short, you install VMware absolutely free. You download an ISO image of your choice. I've downloaded a 2.31 because I sort of like it actually, and it loads in seconds. I mean, it loads like within seconds, and you watch it in the video, it just like loads instantly. And you just load it, and then you go into the emulator, and I made this kind of big. I set the font. Actually, I installed the ISO image into, I believe it was a 1 gig or a 2 gig partition. You probably could go smaller. Actually, no, I think I made it in an 800 megabyte partition. I did that so I could save stuff on it, so every time I load it up, I don't have to like start fresh. It will save, and I can set the configuration the way I want it. In fact, I made the kind of font kind of big so I could demo and stuff. But once you start the emulator, this is the problem I was having. You go to the terminal emulator here, type in SU for supervisor privileges, and then you type in net config. This is all in the video, so if you can't see it, don't worry about it. This is what I was missing before. The problem I was having is this was 0. I wasn't getting an IP address from my emulator. So you want to make sure you got connectivity to the emulator, because what you end up doing, and the step that I was doing that I was having difficulty trying to get configured was, take my mouse out of there, was out on my Mac side. And this same thing happens on a Windows or a Mac PC. You got to connect, and here you see I'm connected, so I connect. You run a command, and this is all in the video as well. It's just one command. Every time you reboot the computer or you change networks or something, you just connect the ADB manager to this. So and then I can close this window now that I'm done with it. But in Eclipse now, all I have to do, and I'll just show you real quick here, all I have to do is say to run the project, and it'll all automatically, in fact, we'll run example number 1 here. Let me open it up, there we go. So when I do run as Android application, it will, couldn't find example 1 APK. Well, let's see. Hold on one second. Let's just do this here, run configuration. You put the target here, so example 1, there we go. Put the target on manual. Oh, so it wasn't on manual, which is the problem. We put it on manual, and you apply the changes, and then when you run it, it opens up a little dialog box. Here it is. And then a dialog box, through that network connection, which is the necessity part of it, you select that emulator, and then it loads up in the emulator. And any minute now, there it goes, example number 1. So isn't that a lot faster than using the built-in Android emulator? And this never crashes. And I can customize this. In fact, I can install apps on here. And especially if I'm like running an SMS app or something like that, and there's so many different tools and so many different, it really is more like a true, well it is, it's a true Android port on an x86, so it runs on an x86 platform. So what I've got for you today is a mini PowerPoint lecture on the networking features and networking applications, plus I've got some fun little examples to show you to put the pieces together so that we can start looking at networking features, which is the theme for today. So I'm going to leave this up and running and find that PowerPoint I pulled out. Here it is. This is lecture number 5 of the Android lectures. Number 4 is on GPS. But I haven't, I have to download something in order to make that happen, and I didn't do that. And I figured networking is a better topic to cover before GPS, so we're going to cover networking today. So in terms of networking, this is going to be an overview of the Android capabilities and a little programming tutorial on downloading from the internet. Well, I've got the one that's in here, but then I also have a couple of more. You know, the classic one is the download an image from the internet and run that image. And then the other one is, you know, to connect to a website. It's actually kind of easy, actually. And then there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of need to connect with the internet and to connect with downloading FTP files and telnetting and doing all sorts of different things through Android apps, which is all possible because it's based upon Apache. So what we have are different packages, just like, and you'll see actually with some of the includes, it's just like Java networking. We have the Android.net package as well as Java.net, but contains the networking sockets that go beyond the core Java.net classes. So we can include Java.net, Android.net, and then we can get the interface through the Android platform. Includes a URI class where we can send in a URI, user interface. We can send an address, we can send all sorts of different things automatically, so it's a little bit higher level API upon the Java.net. It goes beyond traditional networking. The Android.net.http manipulates SSL certificates automatically, so, and then the Apache itself is the package that controls the function for the HTTP communications. And then Android.net.Wi-Fi, I'm not really using it because my emulator is running through a port actually, but we can configure the Wi-Fi through an Android application. And we can turn the Wi-Fi on, turn it off, like, you know, put the phone in airplane mode or something like that. You know, which gives us our manipulation through this package. So it contains for managing different aspects of the Wi-Fi network or the wireless network. And then telephony contains the requirement for sending SMS messages. This does work actually. I tested this. I don't have a sample app put together for today, but I'll show one next time. That'll do SMS messaging back and forth. And it's just a matter of opening up 2 emulators. My problem is I only have one working emulator right now, so and only one instance of it will load at a time through VirtualBox. So I got to get 2 emulators if I want to go back and forth between the 2 emulators. Or I could go, I guess, between that built-in Android emulator and the my new emulator from VirtualBox. That might be a possibility, but I haven't tested it yet, so I'm kind of waiting on that. Here's the layout. If we take a look at the main.xml file and kind of imagine the layout, it kind of looks like a web browser. When we do that, we could put a button here, essentially, which is all we really need, and a text bar, to input the address for which we want to go. In fact, the example I'm going to show you is going to be a hard set. But what I want to do is kind of sort of run through this code to show you what's involved, and then go out to a couple more examples, because this one's really not that exciting. It just brings up a website. So the view object may have an integer ID associated with it. So we have the Android ID, which is going to be my button, which is this button here for Go. And then you can get a reference to the view object and the activity by button. My button is equal to button. Find view by index. And we actually kind of saw this already in the Hello World applications that we have built so far. I know we really haven't built that much yet, however, it's all the same. So the more applications you build, which is kind of an interesting thing, the more applications you build, the more you see, oh, it's all the same. If I want to get a button from the R, and we know that this is the resource that's generated automatically from main and from all the other interface objects that we're creating. And this button here has its ID already set automatically. So we just call the ID and we go find view by ID, and we copy the button into the button object after we've created a button object. I think the hardest part probably for people to get used to is the fact that when we create reference variables, it's like saying integer I, float D or something, or double D, float F or something, that we can say button my button, and that's an object, but it's still the same thing as an integer I, and then we declare the variable, then we assign a value to it. So this is actually a declaration and an assignment all in one shot, but it's just basic Java programming. So here's the link activity in the view. And then we add the event to the view object itself, the on-click listener, which is what we've seen already. So in terms of we were going to build this, and then what we're building is just that basic little web page interface from the beginning slide. If we go view.onClick listener, that takes our interface definition for the callback to be invoked when the view is clicked. So we can actually capture the event of that button click, and then on the click calls the view. So called when the view has been clicked itself. So we're listening for the activity, and then when the click the event has actually occurred, then we do the functions that are inside of the actions that are associated that are supposed to be performed when that click occurs, which is actually kind of stuff we've seen already. And in here we have our strings.xml where we've got, it's hard to see this. Actually, I'm going to try to zoom in. I can zoom in. Look at that. It just says hello as the name of the application. Application name is going to be networking. This source code will actually work for you if you set this up. So what you do is create the main.xml first, and then you would create, you'd go back here, and we just go back through here for a second. You'd create this window first by opening up the layout in main, drag a button onto it, drag an input box on there as well, because we're going to take the input box and hard set it with google.com. And then after you do that, you add this string in there for the network name. Actually, probably just leave it alone if you wanted to. You don't really need to change it. And then the other point here would be to add the permissions, and this is the interesting part. So not only do you have to make sure you've got a network connection, but and I'll show you this in Android, but in the Android manifest, you actually have to add the permission to the permissions box. So when you first open this up, it's going to be empty inside. So networking is one of those things where you actually have to tell the emulator. It's not really telling the emulator, it's telling the runtime environment that it's okay to go out to the internet. It's actually kind of a security mechanism that's built in. Why they didn't have it by default, just give you everything and then just have people deny stuff, I guess it's a security issue. If we turned on everything and you had to turn it off, who's going to turn it off? So instead, if you have everything's turned off, you can't read a file, you can't write a file, you can't go to the internet, you can't download anything, and then you have to turn it all back on. It's a little safer because then you have a little bit more control. And it's also, kind of a demonstration of what this manifest is all about. So the Android manifest is where you're putting in the permissions, and the permissions that we're going to do, we're going to add what's called uses permissions, according to which is being displayed on the slide here. And uses permission, you can actually type anywhere in between the application, opening and closing XML tag. You could put uses permission space and android.permission.internet, which is the one you're going to use. And you're turning it on. Or you could use this GUI screen, which is a little easier. If you use the GUI screen, you click on Add, and then in the Add button you get a drop-down screen. So you can pick, and the one that you're going to pick is Internet, because the permission that we need is to go out. So our emulator or our phone can go out to the Internet and use it. So, which is kind of an important step, if you think about it. So let's see, if you're using the emulator, then there are some limitations to the emulator. For instance, the emulator runs behind a virtual router or firewall service that isolates it from your development. Well, actually I had to disable mine, so you might find, depending upon what kind of emulator you're using. In fact, I wasn't running an application though. I had to take off everything and allow promiscuous activity on my emulator in order to get it to work in this building, which is how I solved my problem. Which is kind of disconcerting. I don't understand why I had to do that, but you might actually run into issues as well if your emulator is running behind a firewall. So one of the things you want to do with the emulator is make sure you have an internet connection before you start testing applications that are going to use the internet. Because here's the problem: the emulator is going to come up and is going to say such and such failed. It doesn't tell you that there's no internet connection. Instead, it's going to give you some weird I/O message or some strange Android interruption method, which is actually kind of the nature of all applications that don't run correctly. Unlike the iPhone, that actually kind of gives you, like little things you can click on and kind of read your debug messages. This isn't going to give you anything. So if you're going to create an application, it's going to run on an emulator, it's going to be behind a firewall or a server. So make sure you've got a connection first. And then communicate with the emulator. You can, the emulator device may be blocked by a firewall running on your machine, perhaps. It might not be. This link actually still works. It references from developer.android.com. It's a guide for tools for emulators to troubleshoot internet connections. So, number one, make sure you got an internet connection before you start running this. If you're behind a proxy server, you could actually test by clicking on menu, and then going into settings, I pulled my settings out and I put it on my desktop on my emulator. So my emulator is actually, in fact, if I go into my emulator, I've got my settings. So maybe I shouldn't have done that. I've lost my mouse. Oh, there we go. Yep, there we go. If I click on my settings, it's going to take me to the same thing as if, which is nice, because what you're going to probably do if you start creating a lot of apps is kind of customize your emulator a little bit, especially if you use a virtual box or something. Move things out so you can catch to them easily. But through the emulator, you should be able to click on it, and there we go. You should be able to get, hopefully, yeah, there we go, live internet activity. So if you don't have that, don't start testing yet. So. All right, so this is going to show you, this is basically going to show you some basic troubleshooting stuff. If you go into wireless networks, you're going to go into mobile networks, and you might actually find what you're looking for under the wireless Wi-Fi settings as well. If it won't established, it says turn on Wi-Fi, it won't turn it on, probably a firewall issue, or an emulator configuration issue. Sometimes this stuff is all controlled as well by the emulator, depending upon how you're doing it. So there's a bit of control if you use VirtualBox versus the Android emulator for setting your internet connectivity. But getting to it from the menu settings, going into wireless networks, going into the mobile networks, or into one of the other options, you can see access point names as well. And you can go through and for the most part, you can set proxy port, username, password, all the stuff through the menu items. Or the interesting thing is you can bypass all this, use a terminal window, and set it yourself. You can actually, most of the Linux tools work through both the Android emulator and also like third-party emulators that you get and install. So step number one, what you're going to do is you're going to add the permissions to the manifest. So this is the part I said, kind of, you can use this as an example. It's a working example. In fact, I've got pieces of it cut and pasted already and put into an example to show you. But if you cut and paste the uses permission, Android permission, internet, stick it between the application opening and closing tag of the manifest. I usually like to stick it towards the bottom or towards the top so I can easily see it. If you mix it in there in the middle, it can get lost a little bit. And if you do that, if you click on the GUI, you'll see it in the uses menu. You should see it after you save the file. Also include a variety of imports. You could probably skim this down to Java IO, Java Net. But in this particular case, we're actually using the Java Net, not the Android, and the Java IO. And I have another example that's using all the Java stuff, none of the Android actually packages, because you have a choice. Depends on what you're doing with it. If you're just going out, getting a file, downloading it, and showing it on a screen, you might as well just use the Java stuff. In fact, it's the same application that you could write that runs on the desktop that does the same thing. You also want to look at the Android includes as well the activity, the bitmap factory for an image, let's say. So the app is going to download a JPEG image. Mine's going to download a PNG image. Actually, it's going to download the ITU logo from the ITU website. So we'll see that happen. And then writing on the open HTTP connection. So to open up a connection to the HTTP server, you're going to use the create an HTTP connection object, open HTTP connection. So you're first going to create the instance of the URL class, and then you're going to initialize it with the URL to the server. And then the connection, when it's established, you're going to pass the connection to the URL connection to that particular object. So there's two separate objects that are used together. One's the actual address, the other one's the connection, the HTTP protocol that's establishing that connection. You're going to check to see if the connection is established by using this protocol itself. And then the URL connection object is going to cast onto the HTTP URL connection. So they both work together. There are various different properties that you can set. In fact, you can set it in terms of configuring the object itself. And you're setting up these properties by running methods on the properties. Set URL to this, set, dot. And I'll show you that in an example coming up. So then next, or I should say almost to the last here, you're going to connect to the HTTP server and get a response from the server. And if the response is okay, then you get the input stream object from the connection, and then you can read the input stream object. In this case, it's going to be an image that comes down. So you can read the incoming data from the server and save it locally. The function then returns the input stream object that's obtained. Interesting thing is also storage as well, because on my emulator I have an SD card, a fake SD card. It's just a piece of RAM. You can create in your ADB manager a fake SD card that works with the Android emulator as well, so you can simulate all the behavior. The only problem is when you start downloading stuff from the internet, you need a spot to put it. It saves it on the SD card, because the emulator might have some memory associated with it, but normally it's looking for some storage area. And the interesting part of that emulator is that stuff that you put on the SD card might stay longer than your emulator use. So when you come back in, you might actually have to clean that out and refresh it. And you can do that through the ADB manager. So let's see, this is the source code here. You would cut and paste it and stick it in your activity class. And what do we have here? We have HTTP download, which extends activity. And it's going to be called when the activity is first coming up. And in our usual methods, we've got our onCreate. That's going to, it's going to run the super onCreate. It's going to look for the layout for main. And then it's going to take, we've got an input stream method here that's going to essentially, from the HTTP connection, get the stream of data that's coming. So it's going to throw an IO exception if it can't get it. It's going to first create an input stream in, have it equal to null, and then later we've got our connection here where we're going to say our URL, add our URL to the connection, and then throw an exception if the URL doesn't work. There's a problem with the URL. And then we're going to try the connection here with our connection object, and then we're going to set allow user interaction to false, because this is going to be behind the scenes as a background process. Set the instance follow redirects, send a bunch of, and these are just different optional parameters that you can set depending upon the application, your use, the functionality. Anything else? Oh, there it is. Okay, let me zero out a little bit here. So step number 4 is to modify the GUI, essentially. So the main.xml code itself sort of looks like this, and you can cut and paste this and put it in. We're just setting the parameters essentially for the image, for the image view. It's going to we'll create an image view, which is just going to be a box that the image is going to be downloaded and stored in. In fact, we're just going to say the image view is going to be equal to this, ITU logo.png, or whatever we're going to call the input stream that actually gets sent to us. So we have a linear layout as before, and I kind of went through this part in the Hello World tutorial. So hopefully this is slightly familiar to you, hopefully. But here's our, I'm not going to use this, but, well, no, excuse me. I have a different package, different information for the linear layout, but you could cut and paste this actually, and this is going to be a very similar functionality in terms of what's going to happen. So we have a text view as well. We have an image view, so and a button essentially that is on the particular screen. And then step number 5 is going to be writing the download image method to say, go get the image, download it. Or no, we already got it. Now at the connection, we're going to download the image. So we put that functionality into a separate method. So the download image function takes the string containing the URL of the image to download. Then it calls the open HTTP connection function, obtains the string object from the reading of the image data, takes it and is sent a decode stream method automatically. In fact, all this functionality is built in for you. It already knows how to get a string, how to decode a string, how to figure out that it's an image, and how to add it to the image box, which is nice. The API really does automate a lot. So the decoded bitmap is then returned, hopefully, to the download image function. And this is what the source code actually looks like. So this is all that stuff on the left-hand side is a description, essentially, of what's happening. We're just doing a try and a catch here on opening up the stream and decoding it, getting the bitmap, and taking bitmap factory.decode stream and code it, put it into a bitmap And bitmap is a bitmap image, I mean a bitmap object, because we have a built-in object called bitmap. So as a data type, it's an image. So. And then the last is to test the downloaded image function, modify the onCreate event as follows. And here's the modification here while we're sending it here, that download image as a method call from the onCreate, so that when we load the application up initially, the onCreate runs and downloads the image and populates it in the screen. And I'm going to demonstrate this functionality to you as well in a few minutes. But this is for a streetcar in this particular example that's out. In fact, I think the streetcar actually still exists out there. I think this example might actually work as is without having to change the image. And then the image is going to be equal to the image view, so you can set the image view. So you could easily, like maybe every 5 minutes, have it go out and get another image, put it in the app. So you could use it like maybe like a photo stream or something. So here's the finished app as it's running on the emulator, where we've got the output over here, where we've got this picture that comes through and it's loaded in the image view object. And we still have the name of the application up here along with the hello world string that's over here. So not that elaborate, but you can kind of see where it has functionality in terms of getting stuff from the internet, because that picture is not on. So, but the picture is downloaded, so it does take up memory essentially. Alright, so let's take a quick look here then. So I've got another one on intents, but let me find, I should have labeled these, except for example 1, example 2, example 3, example 4. Not very self-explanatory. Except for in here I've got example number 1, example number 2 we actually did last week. And I sort of wanted to I failed at demonstrating them last week because my emulator was acting up. So I could, in fact I probably should just go ahead and run through those, but menu example, hold on 1 second. I've got, so it's past number 4, it's probably number 5 that is the one we just looked at. Let's take a look at I'm going to just take a look at number 5 real quick to see if that's the one I'm talking about. Input stream, yes, okay. So it's actually example number 5 here. And let me make this a little bit bigger. You can sort of see what's going on. And, let me close 4. And I will make these projects available. I am just assembling them. In fact, I probably should give them more specific names, because it's hard to tell that example number 5 is this one we just looked at in the PowerPoint slide. So this is the image view. It has one class, and I called it example 5 activity. And so maybe I'll just leave the naming the same way, and instead I'll just label them when I put them in bhacker.com so you can see what they are. Because I know a lot of students might want to take and pull from this stuff to, kind of, create other applications from it. Every time you want to download an image, here you go. So what are we looking at in terms of packages? This one is using a Java net URL because it's going to get the URL. It's actually, I put the I2 logo on the bhacker.com website because I didn't know where to find it actually on the I2 website. So I moved it over to my website so I could download it from there. So I've got the IO input stream, is what I'm going to need. And then I've got the regular old activity for Android. And then the drawable, because we need the interface, and the image view as well, and the OS bundle. So on the onCreate, I'm creating an image view. Image is going to equal to a new image view this. So I'm getting a new image view. And then downloadable drawable, drawable object that's going to load the image from a web operation. Well, that's this private method here that's going to, or object here that's going to be called. It's going to perform the download for me, and it's going to use. I'm going to send it this URL, which is the location for this image, and then I'm going to, on the image object itself, I'm going to set the image downloadable to this, so it's downloadable to this object, and then and then set the context view to image, so the image will actually show it to us, and then here's the functionality. And so for the load image from web operations, it's a basic copying from the input stream. From the URL, we're going to get the content from the URL object that's going to be formatted or typecasted to an input stream, like treated like an input stream object, added to IS, which is of type input stream. So the trick is essentially, we could separate this out into a couple of different lines if I wanted to, but it's nested here just to show you how quickly you could take the input stream from a new URL.get content. And then we are creating our drawable D object instance that's going to create from a stream, IS, and then the SRS name, which is what we're going to call it. And then it's going to catch any IO exception that might exist, might occur. And then the main, actually the manifest, let me just show you the manifest real quick. The manifest has this in it. This had to be added to it. And what is this? This is what I was showing you in the slide set. It's the uses permission. In fact, this is, nice little toggle box actually. So you don't actually have to type it. You could just select it from the box, or as we can see it in the HTML, in the XML interface, we can see it. You can see it right here. So we've got the uses permission Android.permission. If you don't put this in here, you're not gonna, even though you have connectivity on the phone, it's not gonna connect. Your app isn't gonna have the permission to go out to the internet and connect to something. And the interface to it, in terms of the resource for the layout, is going to be very simple. It looks like that. Very simple. It just says example 5, hello world. So because we're going to put the image out here, we're just going to copy it out to the interface. In fact, this is our default behavior. And there's nothing in there. There's a text view, essentially. So it's not that much code, actually. It's just the trick is essentially setting a correct URL, adding the permissions, and then testing it, essentially. So this should, if I run it, let's run as an Android application. Open up this console window, and I can sort of see it running. And I should still be connected here. Here it is. So it's using the image from ITU logo, and it put it on my. This is the running application essentially, which kind of a blurry image because it's all stretched out. I could set the height and the width of that image view and make it smaller and put it in the middle of the screen or something like that if I wanted to. But, this is essentially, except for the slide set had a text box, so you could actually type in the name of the URL, the name of the image that you wanted to download. I believe. Maybe not. I didn't look at it close enough. This is a slightly different code, slightly different, but doing the same thing. In fact, fewer steps, actually. So last week, I was showing you 2 examples that I couldn't demonstrate because I was emulator handicapped. And those I'm going to make available as well. And that was example number 1 and example number 2. Example number 1 was actually the interesting one. It was showing the processes. And the purpose of that example, I may have actually had that one working, I'm not sure. I don't remember. And I'll make these available as well. It was keeping track of how many times the program started, stopped, or was paused. And the interesting thing is now with this other emulator, I can actually show you a pause because I can pause it, which you don't normally get in other emulators. But let me just demonstrate this to you for a minute here, and we're basically keeping a counter for paused, killed, and stopped, and it's going to be incremented. And it's basically showing you that this is really a thread application. And this thread itself, it was paused for another thread to run, or it was stopped, or it was started, or it was killed. So if I run the application, I see it's was paused 0 times, stopped 0 times, and killed. This is an add-on tool actually that mimics the button on the side of the phone. It gives me instead of this emulator being split in half with the fake controls here, the controls are integrated into the emulator. So if I click on this home button, it takes me back home. Or if I click on the menu button, it takes me to it brings up the lower menu where I can go into settings, stuff like that. And I've got the application actually started. So what I just did a few minutes ago is I paused it when I went to the menu here and I went to home, and then I killed it, or I stopped it and restarted it. So I got a 1-1 going on here. If I'm here and I just press escape, I believe it kills it. Let me just see. No, it's 0-0. It killed it completely. So now I'm really running fresh. Hold on 1 second. Let me go back this way and see. No. All right, so mimicking the behavior might be a challenge depending upon. Now it's got one stop. I haven't quite figured out how to kill it yet. But if you put on an application to kill a process from another process, actually, I wonder if the PS command will work for my terminal emulator. It will. I could kill it this way if I knew the job number. Where's my... Here it is. Or... what's it called? It might be called... well, I need the process... I'm looking for the process ID so I could kill it. I may not actually get it. It's probably loaded towards the bottom here. Now, I don't actually visually see it, but if I were to take some time and look for the process ID, I could type in like the regular old command to kill it, and I could kill it, and I could see that the kill would actually increment. So, so the object life cycle and the object life is essentially what was being mimicked there, and the ability for the process to run simultaneously with other processes and to be paused and restarted and to be stopped and to be killed. It was supposed to be demonstrating the process activity. And that was what we had, that's what I had brought up last week in terms of the example. The second example that we looked at, this is the one that would really be interesting for you to see, is the DDMS, the debugging tool, and being able to put a string in there. And this example here uses this code here that adds a log ID called test for debugging. And what we can do is, and it works with this emulator as well, we can load a program up and then put something in there to log some sort of an event and see if the event has occurred and see how many times it's occurred or what. And we can actually even get information. It's almost like doing a printf or something, or a cout as you're going along. You're doing this math calculation, or you're doing an accounting program and you're just printing status stuff to the screen. Well, this can be done the same way. Because you've got a GUI program, so what are you going to see? Well, hopefully it'd be nice to see the debugging and the DDMS message exchange. So when you run this particular application, which is example number 2, see example number 2 out here. If I click back into Eclipse while example number 2 is running, and I change the view, so I go to the window and I change the view, the open perspective, to the DDMS. This view changes, and now I see real time. And this works as well with this emulator as well as the Android emulator. It works the same way. I see it looks like what the filter name? Okay, I was testing along with it. If I look at test here and filter by test, I see test, because I only ran it once. It's running from, this is the path, this is what I made for the package. And then I see test over here. And I see the text that was associated with test. So I can see that it actually made it that far. And that the information was actually written out. And what happened over here is I just created a filter for it. So if you create, actually let me close this. I'll show you the filter that was created for this. Edit it. There we go. It's a simple one that's looking for test, which was the logged information that I had in that source code. And so when test comes up, the tag gives me the text me, which is associated with, if I change the view back to Java instead of being on the debug mode, I can see it right here. Actually, this is the line that's showing up the information that's being added to the log. So I can say, you know, log test me, test me, which means I made it to this functionality, I made it to that method, I made it to that method. And you can see a whole stream of these. It's kind of like putting a printout of each one of the steps to see, well, when is my program failing? And you can watch it before it fails to kind of see the logged information that is generated. So it's like having a console screen in a lot of ways, but you get more information on the console screen because you get a log of all the events that occurred. Like if you're having port issues, if you're having, let me just switch back to that window real quick. It's a DDMS window. If you're having, here's something. It shows you all the activity, memories that's being freed up, memory that's being allocated, and by which processor was example 2. And we had the, we had activity manager that started, and we can, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Most of the information kind of reads like Greek a little bit, but it does sort of tell you a little bit of, and you can look for certain things happening. Here was a starting an intent over here, loading the internet, the Ethernet class itself from Ethernet. So, all right, let me switch the view back. I have another, perspective, back to Java. All right, I don't know if we did example number 3, and I don't remember what example number 3 was about here real quick, so let me just take a quick look. Let's see. I have a cheat sheet method figuring out what example number 3 was about, because I've documented it here. It was an edit text example. The edit text, let's just see what was good about that. This was another example that I had run through in the first, maybe even the first week actually. And it was kind of an old example I haven't really shown you yet. It's just a matter, it portrays the concept of event-driven programming. So it puts a button out there and it registers each one of the clicks by actually updating a text box that says click every time you press click, 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 click. And it demonstrates how the event-driven behavior works with the commands and with the buttons and the GUIs that you're putting out there. And as an example here, I'm just creating a message from on create to show you. In fact, this particular example is just to show you which functionality is going into which method and how the user's activity is actually being created with the listener. So the listener is basically picking it up and then writing the word click. So on the click, the text in the text box is going to say this text plus a click, plus a click, plus a click. And we're going to also get this from on create is going to show up. So it basically shows you the entire starting of the application. And this is also something that you can do to troubleshoot as well if you're interested in kind of debugging. Where is my program stopping? So if I run this, and this is example number 4, or example number 3. So I had the from on create from the beginning because when the program started, it's going to put from on create in there. And then every time I press the OK button, it's going to add a click. So it's it basically demonstrates how to create event-driven behavior. So, and there's my keyboard. So it's interesting because the click is over here too. It's not on the button, but I'm getting the number instead of the click. I'm actually getting the text actually showing because of the text functionality. All right. Just because I'm going through it, let me just see what example number 4 was all about. I believe I had gone through example number 5, which was for today's lecture. But number 4. I'm going to go back to my cheat sheet for number 4. The menu example. So we have the menu The number 4 is actually kind of an interesting one. In fact, the beginning of these examples is just showing you features of the phone or features of the Android API. There's a menu. You know, when you press the menu, you get that little menu that shows up at the bottom of the screen. On this particular emulator, you can also show up higher up, depending upon how you have it configured. But it's really known as the menu. It's like when you press the menu button. And so it doesn't really matter what button you're pressing or where in the emulator you're doing it. You can populate it with your own items and create your own menu options for each one of the applications that you're building. And in this particular example, it's creating one that says there's a mom and a dad. You press the one or the other, and it tells you which one you pressed, essentially. So you're selecting menu items, and it's only demonstrating how the on-click listener picks up which menu item was created, and then also the populating the menu items or creating the menu items. In this example, only creates 2, obviously. It puts the text, there's a button you say click, so kind of trivial. One of the text messages, one of the IDs, and it's using a case switch here, it says when the ID is dad or when the ID is mom, return. It's not really doing anything. No functionality is actually being performed. So let's see how that menu option actually works. So it's the same example as the previous one. It's doing the same, it's just an add-on to the previous example, so I can get my clicks. But if I go like this, and I click on the menu option for the program, then this is where I get the hi dad, hi mom that shows up on the bottom of the screen. So I took the example number 3 that we just looked at a few minutes ago with the clicking, and you just added the menu essentially onto the bottom of it by creating a menu and adding and doing a case switch on each one of the items. So if it's there, it puts dad up here. So if you click the menu and say, hi mom, puts mom up here. So, and we can still have our click behavior. So it kind of demonstrates the concept of being able to add that menu. And the menu itself is actually kind of interesting. This is only 2 items. If you had 3, it would actually divide out the space 4 until it actually, stacked up upon itself. And you can, obviously determine which order ahead of time before you create that menu, how you want the items to appear. So the fifth one we actually went through as well, and that one was on the internet, going back to where we are today. Actually, this is just catch up from not being able to demonstrate to you previously. So today we actually looked at the internet options and loading the image. We've got 2 other ones. It's called a lazy list that also uses the internet, and then there's an intent action demo that uses an intent with an internet connection, which is kind of interesting. The lazy list, let's do the intent first. There's a couple of different, in fact, I want to say it's the next lecture is going to be doing, hold on one second, let me just see real quick. No, it's actually the next one's GPS. And I'm also going to put, I'm also going to put these up on the website as well. But I found some really nice, it's open source distribution because we don't have a textbook for this course. What I did is I found some really nice PDF files that are distributed via open source that a lot of universities are using for education, for teaching different stuff. And this first one, which was actually called Android 2, we've already actually covered all the material in there. And I will be populating the website with this very soon. But it goes through different, the web interface, view, just different options and things. History of Android, which probably, Android parts, which I've kind of covered already, the manifest, the activities, the views, the intents, and stuff like that. And concept of the Android activities, the life cycle of the object. There's examples like I just went through in this PDF file as well, where you can cut and paste, and it'll show you, things about, let's say, for intents as a concept. And the intent example is a variation of the one that's in here. And the one that's in here kind of tells you what the content or what the concept of intents are. And it's an underlying feature of the Android development environment which you're going to use. And so used to move from one screen to another. So an intent. Well, it's when one program calls another program, but it's not really a program, it's a screen. So you're communicating between applications, essentially. You create an intent, and it's almost like a pipeline between the two screens. You can send data back and forth, and you can use it amongst different applications. So we have it contains as data, actions that are associated with it, what you want done, a main, a view, a pick, an edit, all sorts of different things. We have a thing called an intent filter. So if the intent and activity, what intents an activity can handle is controlled through the filter, the intent filter. And then to move to a screen, register an intent, we have a start activity and intent. Also, the concept of service is part of the intent, sort of. So it's code that runs, a service is a background process, or code that runs in the background, but essentially when you're creating and working with intents, you actually have multiple running processes, because you have at least two applications, or two pieces of the application, or two screens of the application running. So you can sort of treat them as well as a service, or in terms of a foreground and a background. And so a lot of times this comes in handy when you want to take and have a background process that's going to open up your mail program and send something out, or download something, an image or a file or something, before you can view it or something. So usually there's no GUI associated with services. Intents have GUIs. So the intent is the concept of communicating between different GUIs in the foreground. Services are the background, no GUI, which is really the difference. It can be long-lived, can be running constantly. In some ways, the notifications are a service, run as a service, background process. So do music players and things, if it's actually running as a background process. So a lot of music players stop at certain times when certain applications open up. So you can sort of tell how the services are run. The other concept is the notification, which is sort of different than a service, because it does come to the foreground. So a service is normally no GUI, no background. Excuse me, just background, no foreground. Notifications, you get an icon that appears in the status bar. And I believe next week I will have a notification example for you. And so it's used to notify the user, have an SMS comes through, a voicemail comes through, a call comes through. And the notifications are actually quite easy to work with. So sort of the goal is to kind of run through all of the features of the Android development by starting with the easiest ones and working forward. So notifications as well is one of those easy things. I'm going to show you an intent today, but next week we'll see SMS and we'll also see the notifications. We also have this thing called the content holder. So it's a set of methods to let applications access content provider data. So we can get at content. So it allows multiple applications to access the data. What's content? Address, book. Actually, previous SMS text could be considered content, depending upon how you've got that stored. Content may also be files, address book, app market, anything that's providing information, providing data will fall into that category. We've seen the activity lifecycle, and that was the one with the processes and the activity states of paused and running and stopping. And that's another picture of that diagram. In fact, this was supposed to have been last week's lecture. This was actually last week or the week before. So you can kind of see how those processes go from start to resume to pause. And then, if you're familiar with this concept and you can actually mimic it, then you can tell, and your application can release memory when it's paused, not hold on to something. And you can actually streamline the content to what you're getting. The rest of this we've actually gone through already, so I was only highlighting things that we had missed. So this one is going to be, I'm going to put them in a separate category, but right now I've got it called Android 2. I've got to come up with a better naming convention for it. Android number 3, which is the one for application flow, layouts, and intents. This is the one that we haven't hit yet in terms of content. And you'll see some references up here. Actually, you'll see the open source credits right here. You can go to this website actually and read about the license and stuff. But in essence, you'll see a lot of examples at these URLs here that are also associated, contributors to this article, this content. And you can also see an IQ Touch demo at this particular directory, excuse me, JQ. It's a plugin for web development. So the plugin actually that's being used in both the iPhone and the Android, and some other test operations as well. But you can definitely find some more information regarding extra reading or stuff for inquiry at that website. So the application flow, in terms of what we're looking at, so we set the relative activities, we combine them into one application file, the APK, which actually gets created automatically when the information or the app gets sent to the emulator, and then it launches from the home screen. So we can sort of see the flow in terms of the events that are occurring. We have tasks that can be programmed. So it's a sequence of activities that the user follows to accomplish an objective, to get email, to want to open or close a file. So the user can interrupt a task to start a new task, resume a task where they left off, hopefully. And the application goes into different states depending upon what task is being performed in terms of the application flow. To interrupt a task, the user presses the home and starts an application, maybe notifications. Notifications actually are an interruption, I should say. They're not really an interrupt. Well, they are sort of an interrupt if you think about the concept. Notification just gets fired out whenever, like you're in the middle of doing something and the notification appears. And it's an interruption, and it interrupts the current task. You click on that notification or drag it down, and you're interrupting your current task. So your application can actually knows what state it's in, as we've seen already. So you can tell when it's been interrupted, or it's been paused, actually. So we have the activity stack, which is sort of the runtime environment stack equivalent. So the history of the activities used by the user, you can tell what the user has done, may also include activities for different applications. So we can track that data. Back button removes top of the stack item, makes the text activity active. So it's sort of like using a web browser in a lot of ways and hitting the forward and back buttons. And we have that web history. Well, we also have the web activity. So it's more than just what URL they went to, but it's what buttons were pressed, what application was running, what data was transmitting, stuff like that. So the stack only goes back to the start of the application at home. So, and then when the application stops, it's over with. So here's some sample user flows where we've got an application as an example that's empty, that doesn't have any restaurants in there. And we go and we look at stuff, and we get a couple here. These look like 3 different ones, and then we go forward. So we have to the map activity. We might actually move from an address, click a map button. So a lot of the applications that you're going to be developing on this particular platform are activity-based. So you're looking at application flow. It's kind of a different form of programming versus like desktop applications or network applications, because you're looking at putting pieces together and gluing them through the flow so that certain things open up to utilize. Because you're not going to create a new mapping program. You're going to use the service that's on the phone. You're going to use a feature. So in a lot of ways, you're connecting this flow through the intents, which is why I mentioned this. It's like how we get information from one screen to another. And how we send this address to the mapping program is going to be through an intent or something. It's going to be through some communication between the different screens. So we have the activity stack in this particular example where we have home, and then we brought up a restaurant, and we clicked on all, then we picked Chipotle. They make good burritos. And then we went to Google Maps, and it opened up the address for Chipotle so we can go buy a burrito, which is simple. But and there's multiple activity stack as well. We can complicate the matter a little bit more. We can say, well, we want this restaurant going on here, but at the same time, we can launch a calendar, go from the month view to the day view, because we want to know when was the last time we had Chipotle or something. We want to make sure it's the right day of the week where they have their specials or something. So we can have this open up simultaneously, and we switch back and forth between the applications. So they're both really running at the same time. And so the activities are going to show you the activity stack separated out per application, which is interesting. So going back to Unix concepts, each process is in its own process space. They're both running simultaneously. They both have their own stack. They both have their own events that are associated with the process. So this process over here can't really kill this one, but it can talk back and forth. So applications and activity stacks. So you can launch a non-running application, as an example, create a new activity stack, put the application's beginning activity on the stack, then launch a running application, show the activity on the stack on the top of the application's activity stack, but the activity may be from another application. So we can share activity stacks by switching, by creating stack order or stack entries as we start launching new applications. And for exceptions, some background activities return to their initial screen. Contacts, gallery, those things like that will go back to their initial screens. Some activities continue to run while in the background, like a music player. So in terms of the layouts, you've seen a lot of the layout information already. Here's a summary of the ones that we've seen. I haven't seen table layout. We've seen linear layouts, frame layout. So if we have a frame layout, we display every child in the same location. And in a linear layout, one child destroys another, which is what we've been using so far. So vertical has one child per row, so respects child margins, gravity, weight. Table view, so it has rows and columns, so each one of the cells can contain a child. And these can contain child forms, is what this is referring to. So we can have multiple activities occurring simultaneously through the same layout. So we can have an absolute layout, which I think is depreciated right now, where each child is given absolute XY coordinates. Relative layouts, each child's position is given relative to the parent or the other children. Which is our purposes for having so many different layouts, is to determine which order and which format the children windows are going to actually be placed in. Android Draw as a feature, it's a graphical GUI builder for Android. It creates XML layout files, or you can actually use the you can go to this URL and check it out if you want, or you can use the XML editor that's inside of the Eclipse Android toolkit, which does the same thing. But you might have noticed it's kind of small, kind of hard to work with. If you want, you can actually create some sophisticated XML files using this Android Draw application. And a lot of people actually take that route only because the tools as a package are nice, but it can get kind of cumbersome to work with. Which is why some people install their own emulators, or they install their own draw tools, Android Draw, so you can create your XML interfaces without having to look at itty-bitty little icons and very, very small and not very user-friendly controls. There's actually, believe it or not, Android application APIs that'll take HTML code or Java code or something and translate it into Android code for you as well. There's actually, some of them are doing a much better job than they used to. They used to create a lot of excessive code. They used to make a lot of mistakes, but they're much better now. Lo and behold, the concept of intents, which is what we're getting to the second part of today. So the intent, the abstract description of an operation to be performed. So I intend, that's intend, intent. There's no English translation that works with this word. So it's just the operation that's going to be performed. I'm going to send a piece of information from this screen to this screen. That's the intent. So, we have the method in the Android content context, and then we have the action that's associated with it. Here's an example. We have a start activity where we're sending it the intent, and the intent is the operation that's going to be performed, and it would launch an activity. Or we can have a start activity for results where we're going to get a results back, a return. It's going to be an integer, a pass or fail, or success or failure. We have an intent that broadcasts, so send a broadcast out to all of the applications that are running right now and tell them all to stop or to do something. So it sends to an interested broadcast receiver component, one who is actually set up to receive. A start service, so we could start a service via an intent, start a background service, or bind a service with a service connection, a server connection, and with a return, so we can get the information back from the service. Intent data. So we have the primary attributes that are associated with it, which are the action and the data. So the action is the what's going to happen. Send, receive, input, import, export. So it's the action in terms of the activity. The data is the data to operation as the URI. So, and the secondary attribute, which could be the category, the type, the component, or the extras. So the category, any additional information about the action that's going to be executed. Also, the type might be MINE type or intent data. So components as well. Explicit classes to run, extras. You may go to this URL right here and get every piece of information on intents as you so desire. This is a brief summary. This is just an overview or introduction to the concept. You could spend a lot of time reading it. In fact, there's a lot of good there's a lot of good references here that replaces, because it's automatically updated. The problem when you buy a book and you go through some of those Android, it's based on a 1.2, 1.6, 2.3, and then it doesn't give you everything. It just gives you as far as the author wanted to go with it. And then things get discovered. Oh, it's easier to do it this way. It's easier because there are some different ways of doing stuff. So. Intent resolution. So we have explicit and implicit intents. So explicit, this specifies the component or the class as intent is to run. Excuse me, as the intent is to run. So it specifically specifies the component, which would be explicit, or implicit, where it determines which component to run the information about the request once it's given. So it determines itself. So it's in an action, a type, a scheme, a category. So to explicitly specify the class component or to let the intent decide. We create what's called an intent filter, and the intent filter here is on main, and it's going to be on category launcher, this particular example. So the intent.category.launcher is what's going to be performed. So in terms of the implicit intents, some examples might be an action. So if given, it must be listed by the component as one that it handles, hopefully an action that it's capable of handling. So there's a string which we can create for that particular action. The type retrieved from the data from the intents data, so it's not already supplied in the intent. So if given, must be listed by the component as one that it actually handles as well. Given that you know the actions, you know the types, you know which data they're supposed to receive. So they're very much specific towards the type of action that you're trying to perform. So you can't just take an object and have it do something that it doesn't normally do. So the data is not a content, so the URI, and where no explicit type exists, the scheme of the intent, such as let's say mail to or HTTP, is considered. So the type of data that might actually be given, and it depends upon what the object is supposed to be doing with it. So, and categories. So if given, explicitly list all of the components that it's supposed to handle. So, listed by the components. And here's some intents handled by Google Android apps as an example. In terms of the action of view, web address, HTTPS, secured or non-secured, open a browser, window, show URL that's specified. Maybe one here for an empty string for a web search, opens up the location at the device in the browser to go search for something. A call, a dial, a view. So when you're spending intents on objects to perform activities, so think of any activity that would be performed on the phone, and not listed here, but you could actually open up an SMS application, you can open up a web browser, you can open up or run a call to the GPS or to anything you wanted to, mapping programs and stuff, to find location. So let's see. This intent example is going to be similar to the one that, and this is actually a good example, they're kind of similar. I have a different one I'm going to show you, and I'll conclude with that one for this week. But we have an activity button, so when the button is pressed, we're going to listen to the button. When the button is pressed, the activity that's going to be performed is to call. So it's going to perform a call. So when the button is pressed, the phone activity is run, the phone number is entered, and then the number is hard-coded. The implicit intent to another application, it's going to be whatever default dialer is actually set for the particular phone. So if you had another dialer installed, you were using Google Voice instead of your carrier or something, it would use Google Voice to call. Which is kind of interesting. It's like if you've ever wondered why some programs automatically pull up the right program. It's an implicit, not an explicit, but it's not explicitly saying you have to use Verizon or dialer. You have to use this. Implicitly, it just pulls up whatever's associated with the dialer activity, whatever dialer is loaded. So I'm going to skip this example because I have another one. The other one I believe is I'm not going to dial because it's not going to really work too well in terms of my emulator. But as an example, if you wanted one that does dial, there are ways of simulating a call, however. But brand new emulator, I'm not quite sure how that works on my other one. You would actually have to add another permission. So just as we added the permission to connect to the internet, we have to add a permission to call. So we have call phone. So we add this permission. It allows the app to use these features of the phone to make a call. So call phone is adding the permission. And it's basically the call on the phone. And then we have our intent XML file that goes along with it for the interface. So it really is it's kind of a background XML file. It's the intent, essentially. And we usually call it intent, or intent A, intent B, intent C if we have multiple intents. And it basically gives us the activity description and the parameters that are associated with it for the concept. In fact, this is going to have the ID, the button Go on it. So up here, our intent XMLs are, that screen's up here somewhere. Here it is. As the Go, as the dial. Nope, doesn't have a Go. Has a dial button on it. So I think the button's called Go. So let me just show you another one here. Strings that are set. Adding a new string. Okay, so the rest of this code here is for this for this dialer to dial, to use an intent to dial from the phone. So let me see. And someone remind me, we stopped on the 3rd. I'll remember this from the intents. And I'll skip this other one. I'll do the lazy list next time. But in terms of the intent demonstration, the code that we have here, let me shut this one. I just called it intent A, versus intent B, intent C. Meaning this is just one of the intents, and it's intent A.java. And the intent A is going to be on a click. There's going to be a button. On the click, something's going to happen. We're going to create a new, on the click, we have intent I, which is going to be equal to new intent. And it's going to be an intent action demo class. An action demo class means it's going to run this class right here, intent action demo. So one screen is going to call the other screen. So it's kind of a, it doesn't use anything on the phone really. So I don't have to worry about having a dialing operation, or I don't have to worry about the internet either. So the intent's basically going to be that this first intent A screen object is going to call the second object, intent action demo. And this is all the code actually for the first intent A.java. And then on the create, there's a button here, and you're going to, when you press the button, we put the action listener on it, the on-click listener, and the on-click event makes an instance, and it starts the activity I, starts the intent. So this is basically one way of having one screen call another screen. And what are the screens? Well, they're objects. So one object is calling the other object. And this is really the concept of the intent. It's creating an activity. So the intent is being created to start the second object, an instance of this object, and then it's being performed through an on-click event through the button. So we've seen buttons. We're good with that. And what does this second one do? Well, this is the intent action demo. Not going to do very much, really. It's like hello world. So the intent action demo is this one here, and on the create, it's going to put something onto the screen, actually. It's going to have, it's going to change the intent button. Oh, yes, it's going to call back to the other screen, actually. So the intent's going to have ID intent button, and there's going to be a, there's going to be an on click that's going to call intent A. So intent A calls the other one calls intent A. So one screen calls the other screen calls this screen. So they're just like ping pong. We're going back and forth between the two screens. And it's really the same code over again, essentially. Putting a listener on there and just listening for it. Actually, we already have a listener on the button. We're just changing it so the click event goes back. So this one calls this one calls this one. Not too bad. And then for the main window in the layout, we have main, which is one screen. That looks like this. Click the next intent. And then we have, well, because we have another screen to go to, we have that other class that's associated with this screen here, the intent A class, that's object that goes to extent intent A.xml. So that one's going to pull up this one. It's going to say world. So I believe it says hello world, does it? Yes, hello on one screen. And this is the intent action demo screen, and then this other screen says world on it. Believe it or not, it's a simplified version of some behavior that works with everything. You can use it to make a telephone call, use it to send a message, use it to, you're just one object calling the other object. So if I run the program, in fact, that's the only thing, I don't actually have to allow any permissions on the manifest. I believe the manifest permissions are empty because I'm not calling the phone, I'm not using the internet, I'm not doing anything on this example. So I don't have to worry about setting the manifest for anything. So if I run the intent action demo, hopefully it will run. I don't know if I've tested this one yet. Guess I'm going to find out. Here it is. I say hello. Hello. Oops, there we go. World. Click to previous intent. Click to next intent. So the intent is what's providing the behavior of going from one screen to the other. So if you had, let's say, a menu, and the menu here had a bunch of items and it was going to pick a sub-item on the menu, you could use the intents as a navigational method to go between all the different menu items you wanted to. You can also have menu items that say, make a call, send a text, open up the GPS program, and then when you clicked on each one of them, it would take you to the intent, and what you would do is create, as many options as you had, as many intents. So you create a new intent for each one of the new activities that you want to perform. And you program that. And here, we only have two. We have one window that calls another window that calls the first window. So, I mean, we can have as many intents as we want in an application. And the intent is sort of controlling, and it was just kind of interesting because it's not within the application. So normally we would have like a menu, from a programmer's perspective, and outside of the Android environment, we don't have intents. I mean, unless we start doing thread programming or something, and we have one thread that calls another thread. It makes an instance of another thread, and that thread forks off some work, and then it returns. But the intent is sort of similar to inter-process communication, but it's more of a call. It's more of it's an activity that's created to have some action happen between different components. And the great part about intents is that they're universal. You use it for everything. So you only have to learn one method to call within your application or to call outside of your application. And then you can even have another intent that stops your program after a certain amount of time. It says, hey, if your program has died, get to a certain point, the intent can actually kill the program. Say, hey, you know what, die if you haven't been around. Or, if you're a shareware program and someone hasn't paid for you and it's been 30 days, uninstall yourself or something, I don't know. And in the intent, if the intent was out there, and it was performed, then it would do whatever it's told to do. It can be almost any activity on the phone. All right, so I think we're in good shape in terms of the introduction of a lot of different concepts. There's a million concepts left. Each week I come in, I'm going to have more concepts. And now that I have a working emulator, I'm in the process of getting organized in terms of my examples and my lecture slides and stuff. So who knows what you'll get next week. Actually, you're probably going to get GPS mapping stuff next week, I'm hoping. But I've got to test the emulator out. I believe I can use an internet connection to do Google Maps through the emulator. And that might be interesting to see. But really, if you know Java, The concept is you're just learning the different features, like the concept of the intent, or the concept of using the manifest to set permissions, turn them on and off. And there's like hundreds of these little things. So, and to organize them into a systematic approach is kind of ridiculous. I mean, but you'll notice though by the end of the course, all this stuff will start sounding a little bit more familiar, especially because it's all used in combination. So, okay, well, thanks for showing up today. Sorry about the late start. So next week we'll continue on with more stuff. All right, see you next time.